Hello there. Welcome to Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett. Thanks for tuning in today. I appreciate your time. Whatever you're doing, I hope you're having a great day. Whatever the weather is, I hope it's fabulous. We've got rain here, and it's been really kind of a soggy spring. About the time we thought it was going to get warm, it snowed one more time. So it's it's been wet, which if you're in an area where they've had a drought, then that helps the water tables. But you have to get used to slogging around. Fortunately, Tracy Bray, my guest, is from this area, so she can understand why I'm talking about all the slogging and sloshing. But it's gorgeous. It's really very, it looks almost tropical here with all the flowers and stuff. And Tracy is a medium, so I had a friend who said, you got to talk to her. She blew us away. Just get her on. I've heard all your other shows. She'll blow everybody else away. So Tracy, guess what? No pressure. No pressure.
No. I've got to say, too, the roses, Wendy, have you noticed the prolific roses this spring? They're fabulous.
Yes. Yeah. In the front yard and on the walk down the block, they just absolutely are exploding. It's beautiful. Excellent
word. That is what they're doing, exploding.
The last time I saw anything like that was when Portland, Oregon, they're known for when they have good weather, that normal lush green, their roses are fabulous too. So yeah, it's just the upside. The downside is getting stuck in a flood somewhere, but you know.
Right. A lot of flooded areas and fields right now. My hearts go out to those folks affected.
Well, I've been through a flood and it's no fun, but part of it is that, you know, in any part of the world, there are always different challenges that we have to go through, and that's part of being here is learning how to collectively navigate the hurdle and the challenge of life. What you do is you help people who have lost loved ones or who need to connect or reconnect or in some way, shape, or form have an affirmation that this physical body isn't all there is, and lots of testimonials on your website, people who say that you've been a tremendous help for them when they really weren't sure what was happening and either grieving or confused. That's a very vulnerable state to be in, and what you do is helpful. And if people, by now people are familiar with the term medium is, but each medium, I understand, does it a different way. What is it like for you when you connect?
Well, first of all, it's a privilege and an honor to be able to be in a position of helpfulness and providing hopefulness for the living. I would agree with that statement that for all mediums, it is different. To me, the difference is in speaking, learning to speak a different language. When I read, it's not as if I'm sitting talking directly to another person, ergo the person that's deceased. Sometimes it's like that, but also it's a matter of interpreting a lot of different signs and information that come through.
Does it get confusing, or do you ever get derailed or frustrated with some of that?
I think, derailed, no. It's very rare. The other side, the deceased, I don't feel like they ever derail me. Sometimes the clientele, the living, their reaction may throw the reading in a different direction. But as far as interpreting information goes, it is the challenge of the work. It's taking a look at what I see, I hear, I smell. Sometimes I'm touched. Sometimes I just have a sense about things. Through all of my senses and more, information comes through. I kind of liken information coming through to rain, as we were speaking about earlier. Sometimes it's as if, to me, it's as if each droplet of rain would be the equivalent of a piece of information coming from the other side. Generally, it's from one person coming through at a time, so that helps narrow things down somewhat. But sometimes rain, as we know, is a mist, and it comes lightly, and I can kind of pick and choose and look at what's prevalent to address, to interpret for the client. Sometimes it's like a torrent of a storm, of lots of rain pounding heavily. So in any reading, I would say I never am able to humanly gather all of the information that's coming through, translate it, interpret it, express it to the client. But I have to somehow selectively pick and choose what's there and go with that.
What's really funny is sometimes when you try to get these information bits and put them into words, it's like a little capsule or a bubble of information content, and it means you have to translate, transcribe, see how it applies. And in a room full of people, it isn't always obvious where that little information packet is supposed to be delivered. How do you, when you're getting closer and is it the verbal response from somebody else, or what's your best barometer for gauging where the information is supposed to go when they can't talk to you and you're getting information and you're just going with the flow? How does that work?
Well, when I'm doing a group reading, I equate my style similarly to John Edward, the medium who had the show Crossing Over, who did galleries of people. And when I do a gallery of folks, I tend to do a max of 14 when everyone wants to get information. Certainly, I've done groups of 300 or more, and not everybody gets something. But when I'm doing a smaller group like that, it's generally just a sense that I have I just immediately, it's like honing in on 2 or 3 people, sometimes just one, and it's almost like something pushes my body, my direction, and I focus right there, and I'll say to those people, you 3, right here, I think this information is going to go to one of you, and I'll just start telling what I get, and we narrow it down there. Oftentimes it will apply to just one person, what's coming through, and then I just keep going with that person. So just a sense.
Okay, my next question is, when you're getting information, does it always have to be somebody who's recently deceased, or does somebody else come through? Like, would King Edward come through, or Queen Victoria? I don't know why I'm going there. Queen Victoria. How about Edgar Casey?
I would love to hear from Edward or Victoria in a reading. I can't say those two have ever come through. There have been isolated times when famous people come through that are or are not related in some fashion to the person that I'm reading for. However, usually, to answer your first question, when people come through, they are not necessarily, the first ones that come through are not necessarily who the client hopes to hear from. It may be, it may not be. I never have a clue, and don't look at readings before I do them, so it's boom, fresh out of the starting gate when I sit with somebody. So sometimes people that come to me that are focused on hearing from 1 or 2 people only. And it's not often that someone comes and just only wants to hear from them. But those are the ones that sometimes, more often than not, somebody else will come through first. And I think I don't know why the other side does that, but it can vary what order they come through, how they come through. As far as generationalism goes, usually people that come through in my readings, I find, are from a maximum of 3 generations back. That being said, though, I do some genealogy readings for people that are really into that, and we can go centuries back, and those have been fascinating.
Wow. Okay. So you're with a broad base of information there. The one time I got information from somebody who was a well-known name. It was John Denver, and he told me to go out and look in August, that was his favorite time of year, and to look at the meteor showers, the Perseids. And I had no idea. I thought, well, isn't that interesting? And sure enough, I did some reading and found out that was something that was important, or that was a passion of his. And so that kind of stuff, it isn't always something that you're expecting or you're wanting to hear, but sometimes it makes a connect for you. And my mom later on told me, as a kid, I would lay on, when I was maybe 1.5 or 2, I would swing or lay on the ground and look up at the sky. And she said, no matter where the plane was, she could hardly even see it before I would say, there's a plane. I was always be looking at the stars and the sky. Mm-hmm. And when I met my current partner, one of my first memories was we looked at the stars, and he showed me where the Archer was in this. So it's like somehow those are touchstones for me, my stuff. And so I think your people are doing the same thing in some way, shape, or form when you're making those connections. There's something in there that is relevant for them at the time that they get the information that eventually will connect other dots, if it doesn't at that moment. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And that's a perfect illustration, Wendy, of that sometimes in a reading for me, names will come through. And I tell people that when names come through, it may be somebody living, it may not be. And if it is somebody living, it acts as a stepping stone for me to where the deceased are taking me next. It's not always a direct boom message. It may take a bit to get there to what they're getting at.
Now, a lot of people ask about pets. Do you deal with that?
Did you hear that? I don't know if you heard one of my cats, Lily, just right before you asked that sentence, walked up and started meowing.
Telepathic. She knew.
Yeah, she is. She actually sits with me during readings, phone readings, frequently, and often interjects a meow when it seems to be a really important point. But yes, I do bring through pets that have passed. Doesn't matter if it's a horse, a dog, a cat. Had one not too long ago. I feel comfortable in telling this story, if I might. It's short. Would you like to hear it?
Absolutely, yes.
At the end of the reading, there was a young gal living who had come up in the reading prior, and she was holding a bearded dragon, a lizard, what are those called?
Is it Komodo dragon? Or
Yeah, and they're like another big, I can't think of it. In any case, she's holding this. Okay. And it's very, very still. And I'm thinking, well, is this lizard just sunning itself and still or what? And anyway, that was another thing that in my job in interpreting things, had this delightful reading for this person, and all of a sudden here's this girl standing here with a lizard. And my thought is, I go through this real quick process of thinking, oh, for heaven's sakes, this probably doesn't mean anything. This is really weird. I'm not going to say anything. But I did. I told the client what I was seeing, and it made the reading. This lizard, this dragon, is something that this child did own. She had recently made a replica of it in clay, which looked evidently quite twin-like, and it was difficult when seeing the two sitting together to discern which one was real. It was her deceased father that was showing me this. Ergo, the deceased father was saying, I know what you're doing. I know what you have going on in your life. I know your passions. I know you're a great artist, and I'm here with you.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Really cool.
I don't know if Komodo dragon is the name. Is that what you were thinking, or was there another reference?
I think it's a Komodo dragon. I called it something else, but it was a Komodo dragon. I want to say it starts with an I, but I'm not thinking of what I had called it. It was a lizard like somebody I knew when I was a little kid had running around their house. but there she was standing with it in my mind's eye. So I just spoke that truth, and that matched up with the client's knowledge.
Well, you have to go with the imagery, even though it sounds, it sounds like you're off the deep end, or maybe
Absolutely.
Grasping at straws. You have to trust what you're given.
Absolutely, and that still is a challenge for me sometimes. I can't push my human thinking and out of it and interpretations, and it was near the end of the reading, so staying on track with it and just going with it, it's very important to do, I've learned over the years.
One of the things that was hard for me was when somebody died under unusual circumstances, and you're dealing with relatives who are not only grieving, but they're also seeking a form of justice or even vindication. And the thing was that at the time, the information I had was to tell the people to let it go, that this was the role of the person who was gone, and it looked very suspicious. It was suspicious. But if they were to intercede or go any further and try and involve themselves, the situation was extremely dangerous, and it would put them in harm's way, when if they just let it be what it was, it would be the karma that would then complete the cycle in its own path. And that's a hard one when you have a parent who knows that this isn't fair, and that this shouldn't have happened to the one that they loved, and they could see all of the details, and yet they're being given a very clear message that might not be the best direction for them to go in seeking retribution or vindication, or, saying that my person didn't do that and they're being blamed. And it's like it all comes out in the wash. Does that make any sense for you?
It does. I have people come to me frequently with questions about circumstances of death and the path to continue to follow regarding those circumstances. Also, there are many people that come to me with unknown. They don't know what happened. They deeply seek, sometimes it's not justice, but seek an understanding of what led to the person's death, particularly if it's a suicide, a homicide, or an undetermined vehicle accident. And I've gotten the message that you were describing before. Ergo, it's best to leave it alone. When I work for open cases of a homicide, when the homicide has not been solved, I prefer to work with law enforcement on those exactly for one of the reasons you stated, to avoid retribution. Also, I will say it to anybody, I don't know that what I'm getting and that my interpretation is correct. And I don't want to personally be a part of someone else's continued angst, pain, or identifying someone wrongly. So I offer readings to law enforcement, all levels, at no charge for that reason.
Well, I also think it's good to clarify at the very beginning. I mean, when I was approached 20 years or so ago and said, will you do this, and are you right? And I said, no, I'm not always right. This isn't about being absolutely perfectly correct, because different circumstances you'll be shown certain things that don't add up, or possibly will lead you on a false trail, because that's the information available, at least through what I have experienced. That's the information that's supposed to be available to help the drama play out. And that is complicated.
It is.
To say the least. It can be
very complicated. And it also, with some open-ended crimes, can come out through a process of readings. There have been some cases that I've read on a number of times, and every time something new comes out. Why it's cryptic like that, I don't know. I can just, go with the information as it is, and sometimes it even shifts and changes. So who knows?
I think part of it's a co-creation factor. It isn't just, we expect this to be static, that everything's going to be all linear, and I truly believe we do not exist in a linear field. This is a multidimensional realm, and so there are different pieces of reality playing out, and your actions, your reactions can shift what's coming into play if you are a solid creator, a solid manifester, and you have the ability to either hold true to your course, or if someone comes in and then you decide, okay, well, yeah, you're right, I give up, and then the whole thing shifts into a different direction. That's just how I interpret it. I think reality is much more fluid than most people have been given as the experience that they're shown every day in the world. It doesn't play that way.
I totally agree. And then in some readings, expanding on that a bit, there'll be an explanation for what has occurred that may go generations back. But time on the other side, certainly, I agree, for me at least, is not linear.
Do you call that karma when it's doing that? Is it some? And I do know there's all sorts of stuff attached to karma, but it's like something happens that then will reach an eventual conclusion because the energy started a certain path, and it eventually comes back, and it may not come back in this lifetime, but multiple scenarios will present the opportunity, and eventually it comes back. That to me is karma.
Mm-hmm. And with clients, I don't use karma as a word. I'm asked about karma a lot. The reason I don't is because I think it means so many different things to different people.
Yeah.
As in what goes around comes around, an eye for an eye. And as in your explanation, that is not what karma is. But yeah, karma certainly applies.
To me, it's like a reciprocity. What you put out comes back to you. If you give this out, then it comes back, because you are you're seeding that energy. Whether you know it or not, you are seeding it, and then it's a way for it to blossom and show you what you've planted.
Right.
You don't like it, then quit planting those seeds.
Well put. To show you what you've planted.
So, yeah, weeding is good.
Yes. And Lord knows we're needing to do a lot of it around here in the next few weeks, probably.
Yay. Well, that's the benefit of having something so abundant and so flourishing, and so, in terms of getting all sorts of revelations. When you plant things and nourish them and water them, or the universe steps in and says, here, then you have to go through and look at your own stuff and say, what do I really want to grow from this?
Yes, because weeding helps growth.
Yeah. I felt guilty. I'm thinking, because when I found out that plants that they screamed in their own special way, or they sang, but when they do that, and I saw the little fairies and heard the little fairies singing, who took care of them and who were asking Mother for the rain and all that, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a whole little ecosystem out here, and if I go out and I step on something, I've harmed it all. And it was like, all these bricks falling on my head of revelation. I'm thinking, and then it was like, just walk gently. The intent is to do no harm, and understand that weeding is necessary. And, you too can be a weed on someone else's garden.
Yes.
Understand. It all works out, and it comes, it's just that, but it's a different philosophy and a different way of seeing the world when those kinds of things are presented to you.
Right.
Can I ask you what the most mind-blowing experience you've had in doing this?
Oh, wow. I don't know if a most mind-blowing experience comes out, and if it does later, I'll let you know. Okay. But one thing that does blow my mind, almost weekly, when I'm doing a reading, particularly in person, when I'll say something just off the wall that's coming through, and it makes sense. Or when somebody comes through by first and last name, when the last name's particularly odd, it blows my mind. It still blows my mind. I think when it doesn't blow my mind, I don't have any business doing this work anymore. It's like, wow, I can't believe I do this work sometimes. Yeah. It's just too cool.
Well, that's the thing about it. I think, when you're first learning how to use your intuitive abilities, and that the telepathic sense, however you want to term it with language, when you're using that other state of awareness and developing that, the challenge is to trust things that don't make sense, things that are anomalies, the quirks, the how did I possibly know that? You don't know it. And that's the whole point. You don't have to know. You're given the answer when it is either applicable, or if you need it to connect a dot somewhere else. And the other thing about that is you don't have to hold it all. You do not have to have some kind of database in there, because it's fluid and it comes and goes. It's, like a tide. It washes in and it goes out, and it takes some things you wish you might have later, which, can be a bit overwhelming and frustrating, because it would be nice if it all stayed there.
Yeah. I think one thing that comes to mind that in the grand scheme might not seem like the biggest reading or thing I've ever come up with before, but I was reading for a large family at their home in Kansas, and was reading for one man about his child who had passed, I would say at least 15 years, if not more, prior. And he had never had a reading before. I had read for several other people in the room and was aware that this child had passed. But at the end of his reading, and he seemed to be very moved by it, he was sitting with his legs kind of apart, his elbows on his knees, and his hands were clasped in front of him. And I was ready to move on to the next person. All of a sudden, his child came to me and held up a gold ring and said, oh, tell him about the gold ring. Mention the gold ring. So I did. And he started to openly weep. And he had that morning, knowing he was going to be doing this group reading, had asked this child if she would mention, and he was not a believer in this work at all, if she would mention the gold ring that he had placed in her casket, he would be forever changed. And there she was at the end of the reading, this child with the gold ring. And you could just see the peace wash over him. And that to me, every time that happened, that blows me away also.
See, I think we, in our own sense of trying to give ourselves some kind of template, some kind of blueprint to know when we're getting valid information, we have to have that kind of content because it gives us a way to connect the dots. And again, you wouldn't have known that. It wasn't something that you had in your vocabulary or back in your file box. It's something that you trust. And so you give the information, even though it's like, well, I don't know how this makes sense, but here's the kid with the gold ring. It's like the man with the golden arm. Never mind.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's a ghost story. I do want to switch for a second and talk about the other aspect, of ghosts and haunted houses and how if that plays any role in what you do at all, because as a medium, as an intuitive, you're probably more sensitive to that. And I get questions about that a lot, and I would like you to address that if you're comfortable. Is that okay when we go into the next segment? Okay. We'll take a break, and the reason I bring that up is because when you're talking to the spirit, that other plane, that other dimension, that other element, there's more to it than just the one you're connecting with, and they're present as well, sometimes eavesdropping.
Yeah.
We'll see if they take notes. Okay, we're going to talk more with Tracy Bray back in a few moments. This is Empower Radio, Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett. Hi there, this is Conscious Living. I'm Wendy Garrett, talking with my guest today, Tracy Bray. She's a medium. She also has a background in psychology, and in that way, it's helped her deal with the people. Because this isn't just, it's not an esoteric out there subject. It's very personal. And people are, we are vulnerable, especially when we have a loved one we want to connect with. And it's very, very important to have it validated that they're there. And if that doesn't happen at that moment, it can be very painful, devastating, because it depends on who you're dealing with at the time. However, when you're working as a medium, as she mentioned before, it isn't always clear what's going to come through. And I've dealt with people who have had houses that were haunted and wanted to know about what's going on in their house. Is it all the relatives coming to stay, or how does that work? And do you call somebody who just crossed over a ghost or a spirit? So, Tracy, dive in. Dive in.
As far as scientifically, when I participate in research with the Windbridge Institute, that can be found at windbridgeinstitute.org, we call the dead the discarnate. And when I'm doing a reading, the discarnate, I say that they are in spirit. That's my word for have passed on. And where do they go? Do they go to heaven, the other side, et cetera, et cetera? I'm not sure. I think all of the above. And to me, that discarnate, dead person, that soul that's coming through in a reading, is very different from a ghost. And in readings that I do, it has been very, very, very rare that a ghost-like presence, ergo, to me, that would be someone, a soul, a spirit, a dead person who has not totally crossed over to the other side. Very rarely does that energy come through in a reading. Having said that, one thing that's not on my website that most people don't know about me is that I have I have an advanced level of training in the School of Interior Alignment, which is feng shui, clutter clearing, and energetic space clearing. So am I familiar with ghost-like energy? Absolutely. Am I able to walk into a space and feel energy, ergo what is there currently, what's been there, what's there in the flesh? Yeah, I have the ability to do those things as well.
Okay, you want to make a little, a clarification for people who like to go to estate sales and bring tons of stuff home and store it in their house? Just kind of, a little, maybe a warning or a take note?
Well, I think that's a good point. Now, you would be surprised to be sitting where I am in my home right now. I live in a place that's on the National Historic Registry, is over 100 years old, and I love old stuff. My house is full of antiques and of repurposed furniture and things, most of which has not been inherited. However, I am very, very, very careful about what I buy, and ergo, it has to feel good. It has to feel good to the touch. It has to feel good just a sense. It has to look good, or in my mind's eye, I can envision how it will look when it's been cleaned up or reupholstered or whatever, because what you're getting at is absolutely correct. Everything carries energy. And when something has been in a place where the energy has not been what I would call all that positive, certainly you're bringing that home. That's why when bringing things home, it's very important to thoroughly clean them before you bring them into your household, as in soap and water or whatever the appropriate treatment is for that item. Taking old fabric off and stripping the piece down before it comes into your residence.
Well, even that in the car, occasionally.
Oh, yeah.
It's a challenge when you realize that your car has another occupant.
Yeah. To me, I am not honestly that aware of the occupants that come with things because I typically am careful to not pick up those things and bring them into my home. And do I think everything comes with a someone? No. But do I think everything comes with energy of something or someone? Generally so.
Well, I've had experience, and people, have told me, like one specifically said that her daughter saw the person sitting next to her in the car, and she kept putting the coat over her head, and then later saw someone in the home. But what happened was the person had said, "Okay, you can come home," because they were just learning about their abilities and sensed this other presence, and figured, okay, and that with the learning curve with that was you don't invite everyone home.
Exactly. And so, there are some souls that are in my home, for example, that I suspect have been in this home since it was built over 100 years ago. And I see them walking the neighborhood at times and things. Not something I talk about very often, but absolutely I'm aware of those souls.
What I wanted to ask, too, and since you brought it up, I wasn't sure how to get into it. In the everyday world, when there are more people coming to the awareness that there's something going on that they don't see, and they're seeing people, they're seeing events, but when they turn to the person right beside them, they didn't see it. They didn't see the person. I have a friend who said one time she went to Quick Trip, and there was this man in front, just so distraught. He had dreadlocks, and he had this very kind of a Rastafarian energy, and he was just going back and forth, and it's just so perturbed and so. And she thought nobody in the whole place saw him. She's like, this guy was making quite a scene. And then when she went out, I think he shut the door and nobody saw him. And she figured, oh, that was an appearance by one of her guardians, as it were. And that they were making it very clear to her that some things happen that other people aren't going to see. But it just really shook her a lot because this guy looks so real. And for me, I was just doing some blog posts today. Whitley Strieber wrote a book about a guy who appeared to him. And it's like the master key or the key of mastery or something. I can't remember. I'm just sorry. And then I went on into another interview that I talked about with Raja, and I believe his name is Sharma. Anyway, he had an avatar appear to him in his room. And he was giving him all this incredible information, and he still wasn't sure that this guy was real. He looks real. And then the guy said, fine, I'll tell you what you ate for dinner last night. And nobody was with him. And he said, and the guy told him, and you'll be looking for me the rest of your life. So these kinds of energies are out there. Now, he said one of the Indian women he went to see, a seer, told him that a spirit can take a human form. We all have ways of trying to validate and give this context, but that energy is there. And right now, more people are having these experiences. And when you're saying, I see them in the neighborhood, is that something that you are picking up on? Are more people telling you that they've had these experiences?
I don't know that I can say more or less, but I can say people are certainly telling me they're having these experiences. And I'm sure you find it the case as well, that there are many people that don't feel comfortable in telling other people that they're having these experiences. And it's almost a relief to them when they come to me and feel like they can comfortably tell somebody. And when they're telling me, I'm just looking at them like we're having a conversation about picking out a bra at Kohl's, that we were there, it was, and it's just, as common for me as anything to have that conversation with somebody. And I think it's neat that people are able to open up with what they are seeing and share it and let it out. And because I think when we speak it, it becomes more real, more tangible, more part of our existence.
Now, have you ever dealt with anything like the poltergeist type energy, anything like that?
I have. For a while, I was doing professionally space clearing of going to somebody's residence, their office, etc. And to me, space clearing is all about intentions of what we don't want to have around us, and placing intentions for that which we do want to have around us. And I have dealt with that energy a couple of times. I have preferred over the last several years to simply focus on the mediumship work, as I'm just more comfortable with the mediumship work. It's to me less distracting and more comfortable, and it just feels like my niche.
Well, and not only that, there's an immediacy about it. You see the result. When you're dealing with the other kind of stuff, sometimes it can be a journey, because it isn't just one engagement. It's getting to become familiar with that energy, with the characters in the space, mm-hmm. and it's not always a neat and tidy line. And so I would say it's much more demanding for somebody
Absolutely.
To get into that.
It is, and I've just chosen not to over time. Don't know if I'll return to it again at some point. And two, I find that, a reading is a pretty clean procedure, if you will. Somebody sets the appointment via phone or in person. We do it and we're done. And if they wish to come back, they certainly are welcome to. For dealing with what I think poltergeist energy is pretty heavy-duty energy, it's not a one visit stop. It doesn't get fixed quickly or removed or, whatever the case warrants. And also, that involves all of the players in the poltergeist scenario, for example, involved whether they desire to participate in that or don't. Sometimes one would have family members that do and others that don't. And how aware people are of what's going on and how much they want to or don't want to be educated in it, ergo their acquiescence or resistance. So lots of factors come into play in that. When doing a reading, people are here because they want to be here. I have a little caveat on my website that if you're not wanting the reading, if someone's pushing you into it, if somebody's purchased it as a gift and you're really not certain, that's up to you to discern whether you want it or not. But the great majority, well over 99% of the people that come for readings are here because they want to be.
Well, and I think that you said that very, very well. It's a one-on-one.
Yeah.
Okay. And in the other scenario, it only takes one person. When you've got a poltergeist activity, usually it's not one-on-one. It's a family or a house, and it's a group of individuals who have been caught in this little circumstance, this little ring.
Right.
And it only takes one to keep the door open, to keep the thing going.
Yeah, and often involving adolescents and children, and I tend to read only for adults. If someone wants to come with their child, we talk about it first, the age, the awareness of the kid, etc. It makes a big difference. But otherwise, my activity is only adults.
Well, and that makes sense. I mean, this is a different field of interest, and you don't know if you're going to deal with kids, what the parents, the feelings about that. It's very complicated. It has to be something that the family is comfortable with, and that's a whole different area. Mm-hmm. So in that respect, did you become aware of your intuitive abilities when you were a child?
Yeah, the first person that had passed away that I saw, I was 4 or 5 years old at the time. I announced that when it happened, and it was not received warmly by my mother.
Oh, imagine that. Yeah.
Received with a whack on the head, and that we're not going to talk that way anymore. I continued throughout my childhood to see dead people, some of whom were known to me, others who were not. I found it, in some ways, it was just a normal activity. In other ways, it was confusing and bothersome because I didn't hear other kids talking about it, and it wasn't something I brought up to other kids. So, yes, it's always been around me. As far as being psychic goes, that's something, looking back, I'm very aware that I was a very psychic child now. Did I define, being a psychic child or being a medium as a child? It didn't define either in that way until I was in my 30s, and I'm in my mid-50s now.
Yeah, see, that's my thing. For me, there's a lot of that stuff I just said, go away. And at one point, when it started having Fast and Furious, maybe about 30 years ago, or, in mid-30s or so, it just all hit. And I'm like, I don't want to see dead people. I don't want to see dead people. I don't want to see dead people. And they just said, it's okay. Their energy. Get over it. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. Well, and it was like, well, that made a whole bunch of difference. But
yeah.
No dead people. Quit it.
Yeah, and the only thing I have ever said to the other side, I don't want to see, is I'm a precognitive dreamer, particularly in regard to air crashes. I certainly don't dream every air crash that happens, but when I do, it usually comes within 24 hours prior to the crash. And after a few pretty well-known crashes happen in a short amount of time, I, through my thinking, prayer, I just said, if you want to give me this information to where I can perhaps do something with it, lay it on me. But otherwise, leave me alone. I don't want this anymore. And now when I have them, they're full of specific stuff where I have done things with that information.
And see, that, I think, is a classic example of you can clarify, you can shift, you can collaborate. Once you realize that this stuff isn't set in stone, that you can kind of, work like you've got a clay model. You can mold it, you can shape it, you can turn it inside out. But it's coming to that realization instead of just allowing everything just to happen and just to be this observer who's at the point where all I can do is tell you what I see. It's like, well, wait. Let me see if there's another way to help this instead of going in after the fact and saying, oh, I'm so sorry. Going in and saying, well, how can I affect a change and release this or shift it if I'm given this in advance, to the best, I should clarify that, for the good of the greater. Okay, because there's some things that are supposed to happen, and we are here not to interfere, but to allow that it is a healing process, whatever that happens to be. Again, that's complicated.
I totally agree with that.
It's just it's not a common thing that people talk about, though, that sometimes things have to play out because it's that course of this collective community that each one is engaged in a certain process. And for one not to be able to conclude it, then it means the others also don't have the opportunity to work out whatever instruction they were given.
Right. I agree with that totally.
Now, for your coming up, Eben Alexander is going to be doing a presentation in St. Louis, and you're going to be there too. I saw that on your on Facebook or webpage, one of the two.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The Afterlife Awareness Conference is happening in St. Louis, June 21st through 23rd. Eben is one of the guests. I've had the pleasure of spending actually quite a bit of time with him in Phoenix, Arizona, last November for a Forever Family Foundation conference. I'm a certified Forever Family Foundation medium as well. And Eben is delightful. This might sound a little odd, but Eben is the only human being walking that I have met that I had the strong sense when being around him that he had touched, he had truly touched the other side. He had truly touched that tremendous peace, and he brought it back with him. It was the most serene, wonderful, exciting, calming at the same time feeling I've ever had around another human being. I helped him with his book signing in Phoenix and actually physically sat side by side with him for hours and listened to him visit with countless people. And he's just a delightful human being, along with a wonderful story to tell. Yeah, are your listeners familiar with his story?
I interviewed him before he hit Oprah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I met him just before Oprah.
yeah. It was the May of that year, I think. Well, I was doing some stuff. The Monroe Institute had contacted me and asked if I would be interested in, in interviewing some of their people, and they had him sign up to be a presenter, a teacher. And so it was just everything happened at the right time. And I interviewed him about the book and his experience. And the fascinating thing is that he's a neurosurgeon. He didn't believe in any of this stuff. This is all no way. And his brains can't do that. Consciousness doesn't exist as the brain's dead. Right. Well, lo and behold, all of the factors that met that criteria, in other words, being brain dead, he met.
Yes.
And he had his experience. Whoa, light bulb.
Yeah. And so many things in the book come together to him being just the perfect specimen to come to us with this information. Because for all factors given, he was one of the most unlikely picks for this to happen to and survive and then describe it.
Well, and I shared another article yesterday about there's another guy who's doing the after-death consciousness research saying that it still hasn't been proven. And it's like he even knows about Eben Alexander. He knows the criteria. He knows the whole thing and says, nope, that isn't proof. It's like, okay, guys, this is just the drama, the dialogue, the argument goes on and on and on and on.
Oh, yeah.
And yet this kind of stuff is you choose what you're going to be receptive to and what validates it for you. But for him, he has no doubt. And that, to me, with his credentials as a scientist and as a researcher, speak for themselves. He didn't make it up. He didn't want to go this way. He didn't want to change his mind. But when we have these experiences that make it real, then we open to a new view and a new perception of everything, not just what that was, but everything. I think we become more accepting of everybody else's reality in that way too. Absolutely. The world looks different through those new eyes, and they are new eyes, and it will never look the same again. That's one of the beautiful parts of this work for me personally. Just the assurance that the soul continues to live, that life is everlasting, and to be a part of that on an active daily basis is grand. Now, did you have a mentor as you started doing more of this work? I did. I don't think I realized she was a mentor at the time. She's now deceased. Her name was Greta Alexander. She was a psychic medium out of Delavan, Illinois, just a little bit south of Peoria, and had a really strong following. But I learned about ethics and professionalism and grace through Greta. She was a wonderful reader. She didn't hesitate to say, I don't know. I remember once she told me I would meet a man who would, and this has not yet happened, I'm still searching, who would take me to Saipan. And I said to her, where's Saipan? And she said, well, I don't know. And I just loved it. And I think of her often when those things come through in readings that I give. Well, I don't know. Oh, yeah. It's just there. Yeah. I'm the messenger. Yep. You're the one that needs to Google that. Uh-huh. Well, and that's the cool thing. So thank you bringing up Google. Before, this stuff was just, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack. If you went to the library, if you tried to research it, if you tried to get a good book, like maybe George Anderson had a book out that would talk about this, or you would go back to Madame Blavatsky, or, you'd go and try and figure out, where do I find the best information? Now, if I do a wonderful little 3 or 4 word combo, I can get reams of information from people in multiple languages, which is beautiful. It's magical. We're all doing this. We're all growing through this together. Yes. When I was a little girl,
Weekly reader book club in the summer was just the thing. My mom let us get any books we wanted to get. And at the time, there were no books in the weekly reader book club on mediums, but there were on parapsychology and on UFOs and ghosts. And I used to, get anything I could on those things. But now the plethora of information is just amazing. And probably explains a lot of what you were talking about earlier, so many people being more aware of what they're seeing and experiencing.
We have more resources to be able to help us track it, identify it, and comprehend. And I don't know that we're all agreed on the same language. That's still, it's personal. And like for me, I have to deal with when you're saying discarnate. Well, mine was non-corporeal. That was the word they gave me. We're non-corporeal. And okay, that makes sense. But that was a term that wasn't in my vocabulary. So when I got it, I knew, okay, I'm conversing with somebody who has an ability to communicate with me and is giving me language so that we know that this isn't just me trying to create, some nice fictional masterpiece. It's me trying to figure out where I'm getting the information and if it's valid, and they use words that I'm not always going to use.
Exactly.
The other one was so fun. When you talk about names, do the animals have names, or do they give you, how do they communicate?
They come through in all different ways. First, I generally get an impression of what kind of animal it was, a dog, a cat, etc., and then move forward from there. Sometimes they'll show me an object, just like the humans will, and let's say I'm seeing a fly land on somebody's forearm, and that somebody takes their other arm and flicks it off. Ergo, I come up with the name of Flicka for the horse. So
you're good.
It comes in one has to think fast, interpret fast, be willing to go out on a limb with what they're seeing. I mean, why don't they come through and say, the horse's name was Flicka?
That'd be too easy. Yeah, I know. It's like charades, and you're going, I'm going to look so stupid if I say this, and they say, get over it.
Yeah, just do it. When I was early on in reading for others, when I would be at that, I don't know if I should go ahead and say this or not, they would show me hanging in midair a hammer like you would pound a nail in a wall, and it would knock, knock, knock. And that told me, no, you just need to say it. Go back at them, knock at it again. And if I did and the person did not accept what was being said or own it, the hammer would go da-da-da-da-da. I'd go back again. If the person didn't accept it again, it would go brrr. And I don't get that hammer often anymore because now I just know innately, intuitively to go back.
We gotta go. We gotta go. Don't make her use the hammer. Give Tracy Bray a call. Thanks for listening. Conscious Living on Empower Radio.